Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to refine this rough shape. Let's first duplicate it as a backup. The shortcut is Shift+D. Create a collection. Put the backup into it and hide this collection. From now on, we'll focus on this shape only. Before further sculpting, let's first remesh it. Keep the model selected and switch to Sculpt mode at the top left corner. Find Remesh at the top right corner, or we can use a shortcut to visualize it in 3D viewport. To get a proper subdivision, we can press R to visualize the voxel size. Move the mouse horizontally to adjust the mesh density. Keep in mind, don't set the mesh density too high at this stage, as a lower mesh density is more conducive to controlling the shape. Let's try 0.02 and check the result. I think this density is fine. Let's remesh it. This way, all the meshes will be merged into one. The mesh is somewhat sparse. Well, maybe denser is better. 0.01 should be alright. Let's give it a go. Now we remesh it again with the new value. Good. Let's keep it at 0.01 for now. Alright, now we're gonna dive into sculpting. First, let's fix these sharp edges using Smooth tool. Well, I need to turn on screencast keys so you can see my shortcuts. If you find this window too small, you can press Shift plus Spacebar to show this list. In this way, you can directly switch to any brush you want anytime without touching the sidebar, and hide the brush list on the left. Meanwhile, you can hold Ctrl plus Spacebar to maximize the 3D view. A larger view enables us to see more of the model, thus helping us better concentrate on sculpting. Display in panel, switch to Tool tab. Let's first quickly fix these sharp edges. Hold Shift and draw. The brush will be switched to smooth automatically as shown here. If you feel the display of face sets is distracting, you can just hide it by unchecking face sets here. Okay, let's continue to fix this big shape. This part could go quickly. There are various brushes for us to choose for different parts. We can fix these issues quickly by switching to proper brush flexibly. Use Inflate brush to thicken the tail. Now, let's go back to the main references. We'll adjust the contour of the back based on this one. I find the lower reference has a more nice-looking contour of the back. Let's adjust the back according to this one. Switch to Clay Strips brush to fix this odd structure. Which is caused by the basic geometries we used when building it. It's easy to form sharp edges at the junction of the geometries, but that's fine. We can fix it easily. Let's take a look at this picture, and we can find a few turning points. We can see an obvious turning point above the hip bone, and another near the root of the tail, then the front shoulder, and then the neck. Okay, let's bring them out. this turning point, and here. Then the front shoulder. That's it. Let's move on to this thing here that connects the belly and the legs. Switch to Mask Brush and work on this part with the help of Mask. Locate its position and draw a mask. Then press Ctrl+I to invert the mask. Drag out this structure. It quickly takes shape, but it appears stretched. So let's remesh it with Ctrl+R. Turn to the bottom view. Let's use Draw Sharp Brush to adjust this structure. Now, let's make it embed a bit on the inner side. Okay, let's check the contour of the back again. We can make the turning point above the hip bone even clearer. Let's switch to another reference for a clearer view of the structure. We'll then adjust the upper part of the leg. Now let's observe the reference carefully and determine a direction. We can see a slope here, which means that the top of the hind legs is not at the same level as the spine. Let's switch to the Multi-Plane Scrape tool. By default, it scrapes the mesh with two angled planes with an inward sharp edge between them. It can flatten the mesh if we hold Ctrl to invert it. We can create a single plane quickly. I think the top of hind legs here needs a bit more adjustment. It should be straight without much curvature. How do we determine the slope of the spine here? Let me demonstrate it for you. We use this point as the center and draw a cross-coordinate system. Then connect the center point to this point. Now we can see the angle intuitively. In fact, we can roughly estimate it visually. This is a basic way of observing objects. I will try to explain some similar methods in the later procedures. Actually, we can't rely solely on this slope because the legs are moving, which can affect the contour of the back. Let's keep this effect for now, and we can refine it based on other references later. Alright, let's take a look at the front legs. Find out the references of the front view. We can see that the front legs are a bit thin. So let's fix this issue. In the stage of framework, I use Grab Brush a lot, which can help me quickly create a shape with contour and volume, although it's not quite precise. Now we are going to adjust the contour of the front legs according to the reference. Let's switch to Draw Brush and see if we can make the couture more quickly. This brush is suitable for creating a concrete structure shape, but if I want a more precise contour, I find Grab Brush is better. You can choose either accordingly. Here I will go with Grab Brush. By the way, let me refine the belly a bit. There was something wrong with my drawing tablet, pressure sensitivity issue. Well, it works fine now. Okay, let's keep working on smoothing out this rough shape and fixing incorrect parts. After the big shape in the previous step is completed, and we are about to refine it, the first step is to correct the shape created during the big shape stage, just like what we did, correcting the contours of various parts, processing hard corners, etc. The ultimate goal of these efforts is to make every part more accurate. Now, with a little tweaking, most of the obvious issues have actually been fixed. Next, let's adjust each part according to the references of different views. Based on it, let's fine-tune the hind legs a bit more. In the big shape stage, we have to focus on two aspects, the contour and the volume. The contour is the shape of the outline in each view. The main basis for making the contour is the turning points we found when analyzing the reference before. These points will help us find the accurate contour quickly. The volume is to find accurate sections in 3 dimensions, so as to build the general shape of the structure more accurately. At this step, the volume we shape is actually more like a delicate gift packaging box. We are just preparing a perfect box for the structure we will make later. In fact, when we first built the big shape, we were already shaping the volume. At this step, we will start to modify the contour from each view to make the volume more accurate. So it can be said that the volume and contour are modified at the same time. Remember, we're not aiming for the final level of details just yet, so don't worry too much about the finer details. Just focus on getting the big shape right. Also, because the mesh density is low, we won't be able to capture very subtle details anyway. By the way, when sculpting, it's better to observe the shape from multiple angles rather than just one. Seems the strength of smooth is too high. Let's reduce it a bit to avoid smoothing away the structure. It's 0.7 now. We decrease it to around 0.4. Good. Switch to Inflate Brush. As we mentioned early, when we work on a thin area with Draw Brush, the opposite side may be edited by accident. Let me show you. See, a slightly larger brush will cause this. That's the reason I recommend Inflate Brush in this situation. Then we can use Grab Brush to further modify the contour. For now, let's keep the hind legs as is and move on to the other parts. Find the previous reference for this structure. It's this one. Let's modify the body shape according to it. First, take a look at this reference picture. By observing the shadow relationship on the wolf, we can find that there is a face here on the back. Here we draw this face. The edge of this surface is positioned quite low, approximately here. Here, the contour is quite distinct. Let's bring it out. First, we use clay strips brush to draw the contour, and then switch to grab brush to further modify its shape. Adjust the belly a bit more. Currently, the mesh density is a bit low, so we are not able to add subtle details. Once we finalize the overall effect, we'll raise the density of the mesh for more details. So for now, we keep its structure here. If we want to make the shape more accurate, thus increasing the density, then the density of other parts will be too high. So if the current mesh density is no longer enough for us to continue refining the shape here, then we will stop for a while and move on to making other parts. Alright, we check its structure from the top view and find a corresponding reference. We switch to a perspective almost identical to the reference. When adjusting the contour from the top view, we need to adjust it in conjunction with the side view, because what we are currently making is a shape with a complex structure. Therefore, the edges of the silhouette are presented by different parts. When we make the top view contour, we must also find the exact position of each point of the entire contour in the structure. Only in this way can we make the top view contour correct and accurate. Look at the chest area. We can see the prominent part is approximately here, and it should be brought out correctly. We need to make this part protrude, while the other parts need to be drawn inward. Now, let's tweak the structure of the front shoulder area. Next, we'll introduce a few essential bone points. The top part of the front shoulder right here is a prominent point, just like the roll of brow ridge, and can be taken as a coordinate system. This part is also an important transition that links the scapula to the humerus. We can draw this bone point above the scapula by pulling it out. Let's sculpt the structure here, and then fine-tune it with clay strips tool. We need to refer to the reference image. Find the reference of body. Take a look at our main reference. We can see the clear contour of the upper leg in this image. Let's modify the shape of the upper leg with this image. Because the faces here are close, we'll use the inflate brush to handle it. Now, let's focus on this front shoulder part. Take a close look at this reference, especially the scapula and upper leg. We can mark it with lines and try analyzing it. We can continue working on it while analyzing new content that we didn't cover before. Let's draw the rough shape of the shoulder, and the shape of the scapula is like this. We can draw the shape of the joint, as well as the upper leg area. Due to the long and thick fur, the structure isn't very obvious, and their extensions might be larger. Nevertheless, the structure here is noticeable. Let's emphasize it. We can change the focal length when modeling. Raise it to 120 millimeters. This is convenient to view the model as 3D viewport without causing obvious deformation. Here is the joint. Let's emphasize it. And the ankle here. Good. Let's further sculpt the structure of the paws. The front part represents the toes. It should not be cubic, so we hold Shift and smooth it out. Now move to bottom view. Let's adjust the shape of the paws. Okay, it looks all right from afar. Move on to the tail. Select Inflate tool. Actually, the mesh density here is a bit low, so we can't do much here. We'll refine it in the next level. Next, let's take a look at the head and neck. The neck is covered by longer fur, so it's challenging to view its structure based on references only. I found out the image of a dog earlier. We can refer to it to examine the structure of the neck. Also, an anatomical diagram of wolves or canines can provide us with some guidance. In the process of making models, you can find more references of this type. Since it has no hair, we can directly see the shape inside and make the model directly according to it. Or you can search for many pictures of artistic anatomy on the internet. These information can help us observe and create structures. When we are making the structure, we can see these protruding muscle shapes, but it is not necessary to use a brush to draw this protrusion on the model. We should not only observe the bulges, but also the concave parts in the middle. Because after we created the concave areas with some brushes like this, the protrusions will naturally follow. So when observing protrusions, it's equally important to observe concave areas. Next, we'll work on the head. Based on our earlier analysis, we've outlined the rough structure, so let's proceed with that reference. Let's start by examining the perspective view. First, let's create a big shape. When working on the big shape, it's not necessary to be too meticulous. Instead, we shall prioritize broad strokes to establish a well-structured foundation. Concentrating on every single detail is actually not what we want. Don't worry too much about details in this stage. Just follow the analysis and get it done by any means necessary. We work on this front part here. Let's modify the snout shape. Now the shape of the head is made according to our analysis. Now let us make the crease where the eyes and mouth connect. Good, just keep it for now. Let's create the ears now. They should be here. We will use Mask tool. Press M to switch to Mask brush. Draw the rough area of the ears. And erase the excessive part. When it's done, press Ctrl+I to invert the mask, then drag out the ears. Cool. Now, let's check the side view. Find out an image in a better angle. The main reference doesn't show the ears from a proper angle. Let's find another. This one looks alright. Let's modify the ear's direction according to the reference. Clear the mask by pressing Alt+M. We don't want the head to be facing straight ahead, so rotate it slightly. Enter Edit mode. Go back to the general layout and set Transform Pivot Point to 3D Cursor. By default, the pivot is in the center of the selection. But my desired pivot is this point. We place 3D Cursor at this point. Then set Transform Pivot Point to 3D Cursor and select the mesh of the head to rotate. Don't forget to enable proportional editing and connect it only. Adjust the radius of proportional editing by rolling the mouse wheel. Well, maybe it's better to place the pivot at this point. Unselect a part of vertices here, since there's more deformation. Alright, it's getting there. Let's tweak its shape a bit. Take a look at the reference from front view. Let's find the position of the ears and adjust the distance between them according to the reference. Since the ear part is a low-density mesh that we dragged out, we need to remesh our model to handle it. But if we directly remesh it like before, the whole model will be remeshed, then the structure we made before will be affected. Like the hind legs have changes obviously. To avoid this issue mostly, we can properly raise the mesh density after remeshing, just modify voxel size of remesh. We can hold R to choose a smaller voxel size than the previous one and press Ctrl+R to remesh the model. Nice. Next, let's smooth out the sharp edges on the surface. Okay, switch to Draw Brush and start sculpting the shape of the ears. As shown before, we will make the basic structure of the ears first, and then gradually refine the details later. Currently, it's all out of shape. We use Drag Brush to fix it. Grab Brush is good at building basic shapes. We can complete it quickly. We're missing the eyes. Let's drag out its structure first, and we'll refine it later. Before refining it, let's double-check if the ears are in the right position from the side view. We also need to check the model in different angles. In this image, we find the ears are closer to the backup, at the very back and of the head. We need to move the ears accordingly. We can also use the eyes as a basis to observe the distance between the eyes and ears, so as to determine the position of the ears. Okay, let's continue to fix this part. Now, we're going to focus on the ears. Refine its structure outside and inside. Let's look at the model farther away so that we can see the overall shape and observe whether the proportions of each structure are coordinated. Let's adjust the shape of the current model from this perspective. During sculpting, it's essential to observe the model from multiple angles. There's also a small structure near the lower part of the ear, known as Henry's pocket. You can search for it, as many animals have this thing. Now, let's check it from behind. Not sure if there's any proper reference. Let's find it out. This one is fine. We can see the structure of the back of the ears. From the reference, we can observe that although the ears are also covered with thick hair, obvious edges can still be seen. Let's draw the edges of the model's ears. Let's leave it at this point. No need to refine it further. Smooth out the mesh again. When we zoomed out to observe the overall effect of the model, I found that there were still issues with the contours of the head and neck, so let's make overall adjustments. When adjusting the contour, we still use grab brush. Okay, let's go ahead and smooth out the body part, then adjust the overall effect of the body in this farther perspective. After this refinement, the basic structure is now established. In the next stage, we'll refine each structure further, making them more precise and complete. Now, let's go back to the main reference again, and double-check if the proportion is proper, and if there are any issues with the overall shape. The length of the head seems a bit short. Then its width. The width is 1.5. Alright, let's keep this effect for now. Here we try to refine the shape of the head slightly, and we try to smooth out the sharp edges and corners of the head. If we continue refining, we'll get caught up in the details. Next, let's review other areas and see if anyone needs refinements. Some areas had a lower mesh density earlier, so we didn't continue working on them. Now, let's proceed with refining. Before that, let's first check the overall proportions and see if there are any issues. Compared with this reference, the back contour here still needs some further adjustments. This leg looks a little short, gonna lengthen it a bit. And clearly, this section is too long. This section should be shorter than this one. Good. Let's check the effect now. Okay, the length is close to the reference. We still gotta nail down more details on this spot. Draw Sharp tool works perfectly to bring out this detail. It's convenient to draw the edges of the structure with Draw Sharp brush. Alright, in the next stage, we'll fine-tune each part to get the final look of the high poly. That's all for this lesson. See you in the next one.